Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazarov Chess channel and welcome to the absolute stunner of the day 7 of the Global Chess League in 2023. We have here the immortal clash. We have here the clash of the titans and the clash of two former world champions. We have here the amazing gameplay by Vishy and Magnus Carlsen. And the game that you see now, I think deserves to be written in many chess history books, but also in many chess endgame manuals, because the endgame that you see will have so many tricks, so many ideas, so many dirty traps that will be set up here. So in my opinion, really endgame worth to study. Pay good attention and enjoy in this really beautiful and amazing play by these two legends. So let's see now what happened with the white pieces. Vishy opened with the move e4. Magnus responsible is now the French defense with the move e6. Magnus recently plays very often the French. Now after move d4 we have now the move d5, and now after move knight to c3 we have now the Wiener variation, the spinning idea with the move bishop to b4. Now e5, the advanced variation, c5, breaking and entering here in the center. As usual, of course, black is continuing the pressure on the queen side. Black is simply attacking this side of the board. On the other hand, white is trying to make progress here on this side of the board because the pawn chain is showing the direction. So a3, bishop to c3, b takes c3, still standard line, and now queen to g4, connecting the queen to the pawn on d4, but also attacking the pawn on g7, g6, h4, aggressive line here by Vishy, which forces now Magnus to make a reaction here on the king side. h5, h5 would be a little bit too rush here because you weaken simply too much your dark squares, and you gave up the dark square bishop in the beginning. So that's why Magnus keeps a certain flexibility, plays the move h6, and now after move h5 by Vishy, now he can pass through and still lock the position here on the king side. Because we have to say it, black needs to be careful here on the king side. Black has to defend his position. White is much better on this side of the board. So now Vishy continues to push here. f4, aggressive method, but now queen to a5. Good move here by Magnus. Counterattack forces Vishy to react with the move bishop to d2, and another great follow-up by Magnus, f5, which simplifies the game a little bit here on the king side, because here e takes f6 en passant wouldn't be so good for white, because knight to f6, the queen has to step back, and now with knight to e4 we could here cement the knight in the center of the board. Now you could maybe try something like this, but eventually look at this with c takes d4 and maybe g takes h6. Black is continuing here the pressure, simple like this. So in my opinion, this would be now not a good continuation anymore for white. So you see, Magnus found a good defensive strategy, f5, locking now simply the king side, not allowing here Vishy to make progress. So we have queen to g3 and now g4. Magnus is happy, I think, to reach this position, fixing simply the structure here, but also this move does another thing. It disconnects now the h pawn from this other pawn. Suddenly the h5 pawn becomes a weakness. Okay, it creates also spaces for white, but it can be really weakness in long terms, and this pawn will have also an important role in the later endgame stage. So okay, this move g5 of course allows Vishy maybe to attack here the dark squares, but still so far I think good defensive setup here by Magnus Carlsen. So d takes c5, Vishy releases the pressure. We have knight to e7, bishop to d3, simply normal development, queen to c5, and now knight to e2, controlling also further the d4 square. We have knight to a5, attacking the c4 weakness. This is now the main structural weakness, I think, in white's position. When we cement the knight here after something like d takes c4, this long diagonal maybe could be liberated then for the light square bishop. So in the game, queen to f2, Vishy simplifies the game. Maybe a rush choice, maybe queen to h4, slightly better, keeping the activity, maybe with the bishop pair on the board, trying to complicate things. But queen to f2, nothing wrong, but it's a more positional line. I think here queen to h4 would be, of course, more aggressive. So queen takes f2 and king takes f2, and don't worry, although it seems that everything is simplified here, please believe me, nothing is simplified in this particular game. This endgame is just beginning now. All of the queens are off the board. Look how these legends are playing the game now. We have here amazing, a beautiful, really an epic endgame battle. So in the game, bishop to d7 by Magnus, normal development. We have a4. This is a good choice. creating some spaces, and it's a usual move, especially in the whenever French. Usually we're trying now to reroute the bishop, find new activities for the dark square bishop. So far, the dark square bishop is of course not a good piece. It's simply a little bit paralyzed by its own pawn structure here on dark square. So king to f7. Now comes this idea, rook to b1, attacking now the pawn on b7. We have b6 by Magnus, and now bishop to c1. Perfect maneuver of the bishop, bishop to a3, and finally getting it on a better square. So knight from e to c6, we have bishop to a3, knight to d8, and now bishop to b4. So you see, Vishy found a way how to get the pieces into the game, and now a good move here by Magnus. Knight from b to d7, connecting everything on dark squares, keeping the grip on dark squares, which is very important, because when you give up the bishop in an early stage of the game for a knight like Magnus did in the game, then you want to have a control of the squares that the bishop used to cover. Now you are a little bit vulnerable on dark squares, so that's why here see Magnus with his maneuvers of the knight is battling for the dark squares in a good way. So knight to d4, the knight is coming into the game. We have rook from h to b8, knight to b3, keeping the pressure here against the knight on a5. Here Vishy is trying somehow to open the files, maybe the a or b file, but Magnus is not interested in this scenario. Plays now the normal knight to c4. We have bishop to c4, d takes c4, which creates now an extra tempo against the knight, and also gives here the light square bishop of Magnus Carlsen finally an opportunity to get back into the game, because in these types of structures, when the structure is like this, e6, f5, d5, the bishop has really tough time somehow to get into the game. With this maneuver, finally, the bishop can breathe and can be activated. Especially, it can also target the pawn on g2, but it can also target, as we said in the beginning, this isolated pawn on h5, which Magnus created in the beginning in this defensive method when he defended in the beginning this aggressive attack by Vishy. So, okay, Vishy plays knight to d4, of course, centralizing the knight. The knight is now, I think, simply the best minor piece on the board. We have now rook to c8, we have a5, and now b5. Good move by Magnus, not allowing these files to be opened here, especially because of the support of the rook here. Both rooks are very, very dangerous. Magnus is simply locking now the whole queen side. So rook to d1. Vishy is trying to search for opportunities. Now the bishop is a little bit loose on the d file. That's why Magnus escapes. We have knight to e2, and now a6, fixing simply the structure on the queen side. Everything is solid now, and now slowly but surely, I think Magnus can breathe again. As we said, this is the clear target. This is the obvious weakness in white's position, but still nothing spectacular is going on. We have to say it. These are opposite colored bishops. Even in a maybe bad scenario for white, maybe if we trade off more pieces, if we trade off even the rooks off the board, this should be, I think, a drawish position for both sides. And the engine gives here 0.0 evaluation. So in my opinion, really thematic here, drawish endgame. But both players want to win, of course, the game. Both players are pushing it further. We have rook to d4 by Vishy, rook to d8. Magnus competes now on the d file. We have rook to d1. Magnus trades off. We have rook to d4, and now bishop to c6. Again, this bishop is coming into the game. Targets, of course, the g2 pawn, and also is not allowing here this rook to come on the 7th rank. So I think when it comes now to the bishop's activity, black's light square bishop is slightly better than maybe white's dark square bishop that has no attacking chances, that cannot attack any of these pawns. So I'm not seeing good ways how white is going to attack, for instance, the weak pawn on h6. So it's not possible because the bishop is simply far away from the action. Now here we have rook to d2 by Vishy, and now Magnus spiced up the game in a beautiful way, played an amazing g3. And I'm not saying this is something wrong for Vishy or something, but this move is the only flexible move that you can make in order to open files, in order to open diagonals, in order to create at least some kind of an attacking chance. And that's the power of Magnus Carlsen's endgames. I think that's the stuff that only he can do, I think, in chess endgames in history. He's really the best chess endgame player of all times, I think. G3 is spicing up again the game, is creating new opportunities. Now let's see what happens, for instance, if you play king to g3. This wasn't played in the game, but this move has to be discussed because it was really a brilliant move here by Magnus Carlsen. Rook to g8 is coming, and then you have worries around the square g2. For instance, you take with the knight, then again rook to g8, and now your knight is paralyzed always here you have a tough time to get it somehow back into the game, because if you move it again, the pawn on g2 is hanging. You could maybe try rook to d1, but now, for instance, this one is coming into the game. You're trying finally knight to e2, but now again you lose it. And look at this again. This bishop is controlling here simply the d7 square. So even in this scenario, I'm not saying white is losing or something, but I think this would be a pleasant game here for Magnus Carlsen for sure. So that's why I have to move g3, king to g1 by Vishy. As I said, he could have taken, but he didn't want to risk anything and didn't want to open files for Magnus Carlsen. Now we come rook to g8. We have knight to d4, hitting the bishop on c6. Magnus counterplays this idea with rook to d8. We have bishop to d6. Now there is an obvious attack against the bishop on c6, because you cannot take. We'll simply take it out, and eventually you lose a piece here. Even if you attack this knight, I will simply play rook to d6, and the game would be over here for black, actually. So that's why after bishop to d6, we have bishop to e4, all by Magnus, bishop to b4, and now rook to d5. Simply playing on the optimal squares. There are not so many great squares that you can use for your pieces. Now at least the rook is more centralized, but again, nothing spectacular is going on. Both players have, as I said, this opposite color bishop, so maybe black is now an advantage in space, but nothing spectacular still, in my opinion. This should be a drawish line. So king to f1, we have knight to d8, king to e1, now knight to c6. Interesting idea here by Magnus, because if you play now something like knight takes c6, first we play rook takes d2, king takes d2, bishop to c6, and now your pawn on g2 is also weak. This could be then a complicated game to battle for black. We'll pick up the pawn, then retreat, and then we push this pawn further. But still, this bishop is holding the king. It's not allowing the king to get out of the game, even if this king somehow starts maybe to get somehow into the game. Also, you have to worry about your h6 pawn. So you see, even in these types of positions, again, the opposite color bishop's endgame is not allowing here some complications for both sides. So let's go back. So after move knight to c6 here, Vishy played knight to e2. We have rook takes d2, king takes d2, and now bishop to g2. But of course, Vishy calculated everything in a good way, and also played now the move knight takes g3, and has now also got his pawn back. But now comes the problem of the beginning of the game. h5, h5, h5. Now the knight is a little bit stuck to the defense of the pawn on h5, although again, nothing wrong in black's position, nothing spectacular, but you have to play, I think, more accurate now the game from white's perspective. I think it's much easier for black to play the endgame. Although again, it's a fully equal game, but you know Magnus is always pushing this kind of an endgames to the limit. So after move bishop to f3, we have king to e3, again an attack. Look at this, you have also some problems with this pawn on c2. Again, Vishy steps back, and now Magnus goes to g4. Still, he keeps the pressure against the pawn on h5. We have king to e3, Magnus plays active with the king, and now look at this. Magnus is getting into the game. He forces, basically, here, Vishy Anand to get the bishop out, to trade off the bishop for a knight. If you don't do that, then, of course, let's see, maybe a bad move or something, then knight to d5 is going to happen, and there's simply no good way anymore to defend the pawn. You can play knight to e2, we'll simply take it out, and then the pawn on f4 is hanging. The game is over for black. So this move here, knight to e7, forces the reaction here of Vishy, bishop to e7, king to e7, but there is now a clear path for the king. The king can be activated now on dark squares, which creates again new opportunities here for Magnus Carlsen. And now Vishy immediately doesn't react correctly. He can play the move king to e3, which is perfectly fine. At least you're controlling here the axis of black's king. Or a more tactical approach, which is much harder to see maybe, is the move knight to e2. After something like bishop to h5, you can play the move knight to d4, and notice now that the king doesn't have access to the c6 square, and he doesn't have access here also to the e6 square. So black's king cannot be activated on any of the squares. Meanwhile, you could maybe start to push the pawns here on the h file, but white's king will eventually come here to h4, and the knight is holding the whole position. And also you have some worries around the square e6. So in one moment the bishop will have to step back. So in my opinion, look at this, black's king doesn't have access, and it's a thematic draw, although white is down a pawn. But from knight to e2, of course, bishop to e2 can be the possibility, but now king to e2, we just get the king closer, and now we are controlling black's king, not allowing him to get it on the c5 square. So this was the must move now for Vishy Anand, knight to e2, or maybe, as we said, the move king to e3. But now he played a passive move, king to c1, and this gives Magnus Carlsen the opportunity to get finally the king into the game here on dark square. So now Magnus is trying also in some lines to deflect this pawn from the square c3, and then get the king on d4, then also get the king on e3, and then if the pawn on f4 is falling, then the whole position could be dangerous here for white. It could be even a losing game. So we have here king to a3, king to c5. Now Magnus attacks the pawn, Vishy protects everything. We have bishop to f3, king to b2, and now Magnus makes maybe his first mistake in the game. Here he had a brilliant idea. Here he could have played immediately the move bishop to c6, which gives Vishy Anand the opportunity maybe to play again with the king, but now he can reroute the bishop on e8, again attack the pawn, but from a different side. Now when Vishy is playing again this move king to b2, this would be now completely winning here, because now comes this motif that Magnus probably searched for, b4, after c takes b4, but we're not taking the pawn, we get the king closer. Look at this, we attack the knight. Now when the pawn is falling here on f4, this is game over actually for white. And the cool part is that the bishop is not only attacking the pawn on h5, it controls also the potential progress of white of the move b5, because here sometimes we can push maybe the pawn on b5 and then let the pawn roll here on the a file. So this bishop would be controlling all over the board. So in my opinion, this was the way to go, and I think Vishy would have resigned after a couple more moves. But after move king to b2, Magnus played b4 immediately, which gives now Vishy Anand the chance after c takes b4 and king to d4 that Magnus played. Again, Magnus probably should have taken this one, but even after c3, king to a5, this is still probably a drawish line, because still this bishop, pardon me, the king controlled this pawn in the a file. It's maybe a more complicated game, but maybe playable also here for white. But after move c takes b4, Magnus Carlsen went with this idea king to d4, but now Vishy played a beautiful move c3, and after king to e6, king to d3, pardon me, we have now the brilliant idea b5, and this is the way to go. This is the drawish idea that Vishy had here in mind, creating finally a passer. But now after a takes b5, we have now the move a6, after king to d2, a7, and bishop to d5 that Magnus Carlsen played. Now comes, in my opinion, the critical moment of the game. Here Vishy Anand rushed a little bit. He played now the move knight takes f5. What he probably was hoping for is to stretch the bishop, because the bishop cannot control, of course, both sides. He was probably satisfied with this outcome, that he could have pawns on the e file and on the a file, and he probably thought that the bishop cannot catch up with them. But a better way to go, we'll get back to this critical moment. Instead of this move knight to f5, here Vishy had the opportunity to play knight to f1, simply attacking now the king. If the king gets to d3, again we'll play knight to g3. For instance, if the king gets on d2, again we deliver check. But now, for instance, if you get here the king to on e3, when the king is not connected to the pawn on c3, and you'll see now why it was important to disconnect the king from the pawn on c3. Look at this. Now, for instance, if Magnus Carlsen would have played the move king to e3, now knight to f5 would be perfectly fine. After e takes f5, now we let the pawn roll. Notice that Magnus in this scenario would maybe lose the tempo here with the king. Now we start to push the pawn. Now maybe bishop to c6, but now we promote, and now we can promote on the other side, and suddenly it will be a winning game for white. So as I said, after move knight to f1 that Vishy should have played instead of this move knight to f5, Magnus Carlsen would be forced to play perpetuals, and this would be a draw. But here Vishy rushed it. Knight to f5. Notice, as I said, the king is now connected to the pawn on c3. You see now why it's so important, because Magnus accepted the challenge, played now e takes f5, allowed here Vishy to push the pawn, but now it's a different story. The king is on d2, not somewhere on e3, and after something like, look at this, if you play, of course, here something like c takes b4, then this pawn is rolling and you cannot stop them. And it comes, of course, also with a check. So it's a different story. It's a completely winning game here for black. So that's why Vishy tried e7. Magnus played now here the move b takes c3. We have king to a2, c2 by Magnus Carlsen. And after move a8, here the promotion. Now we have bishop to a8. We have now a new promotion of the queen. And here Magnus almost messed it up. Here Magnus, again, made a mistake. Play now the move bishop to e4. A better way to go was to play the move c3. Look how really complicated this game is. Really an amazing battle here. But we have to say this was in a position where both of them were under 20 seconds on the clock. So it's so wild to play this kind of endgame. But c3 would have been here the winning move actually for Magnus. Look at this. You play something like queen to d8. Now we cover ourselves. Now when the queen is coming into the game, now again we cover. You can maybe try queen to a3, but now there's nothing that can be done. We just play king to d2, and now we promote to knight. That's the beautiful part about this kind of an idea. So for instance, you play something like king to a3. Now we just push the pawn further. You can maybe deliver a couple more checks, but never really perpetuals. And now after a couple more moves, we'll play c1 and the game is over. But Magnus Carlsen played now the move bishop to e4, which gave now Vishy the opportunity to again play a draw. This was, of course, not so easy to see, but look how great this endgame is. Look how wild, how cool of an idea here Vishy had, because he should have simply played the move queen to d8, which he did. But now after move bishop to d3, maybe you can pause the video just for fun and try to see now the drawish idea here for Vishy. What would you do now in this particular position? There is now an epic tactical idea to get a draw. So please pause the video and try to see now, as I said, the drawish idea. It's really an amazing chess endgame puzzle. Okay. Here the drawish idea is a brilliant one. Queen to b6, not even getting the queen closer to the action, because look at this, after move c1, the promotion, now comes the stunner. Queen to e3, sacrificing the queen, because after king to e3, we have here an amazing stalemate position. Really wild stuff. No squares for the king here. It's stalemate. You cannot move anything, so it's game over. It's a draw. Instead of this move, after move queen to e3, of course, you can play something like this. But now, again, the same motif. We'll simply sack the queen, and now, again, it's a stalemate position. Really wild stuff. So you can play maybe here king to d1, but again, we just sacrifice the queen over and over again, and it's a draw. Really amazing stuff. That was only possible because Magnus played this inaccurate move bishop to e4. Look at this now here in the game, as we said, queen to d8, but now Vishy, instead of this move queen to b6, played now the move queen to d4, and now Magnus played a brilliant c1 under promotion. That's the only way here to win the game. Amazing tactic. Now the king is under fire. King to a3. Now again we have this motif c3, queen to b6, knight to e2. Magnus is now creating a path for the pawn. Nothing can stop anymore the pawn. It's game over. Here in the game, queen to h6 was played, and now after move c2, in this position here, Vishy resigned. Really wild stuff. Let's see maybe a possible continuation. You get the queen here, c1. We have the promotion. Now we take out with the king, which is now important. You can maybe start to push the pawn, but now we play knight to f4, and after something like here h7, knight to g6 comes right in time. There's no promotion of the pawn on the h file, and this will be, of course, game over also here for white. So incredible game here played by these two legends. Immortal endgame here. So many dirty ideas, so many opportunities to get even a draw, but this was epic in such a fast time format. This is really crazy. Congratulations also for Vishy to play such beautiful chess in this event. He only lost his games against Magnus Carlsen in this event, won many games against Duda, against Leveronen, so the Tiger is back, but this was simply unbelievable what they pulled off here in this incredible game. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the winner variation for sure. If you want to see more chess games from this event, you can also check out our coverage so far. Here are some games that we have analyzed before, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos and what to say. Chess is the best, of course.